Donald Trump, the man who during his election campaign called for Muslims to be banned from the United States, here with the leaders of more than 50 Muslim nations, asking for their help in defeating terrorism. But the president said it wasn't a case of them being dictated to by the US.
We are not here to lecture. We are not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we are here to offer partnership based on shared interests and values. Above all, we must be united in pursuing the one goal that transcends every other consideration. That goal is to meet history's great test, to conquer extremism.
But the president made it clear that he believed the onus was on the Muslim nations to do more to root out the extremists in their ranks.
Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land.
He pledged the US's full support in the struggle and said together they could defeat the scourge of the modern world.
With God's help, this summit will mark the beginning of the end for those who practice terror and spread its vile creed. At the same time, we pray this special gathering may someday be remembered as the beginning of peace in the Middle East, and maybe even all over the world. Terrorists do not worship God. They worship death. This is not a battle between different faiths, different sects, or different civilizations. This is a battle between barbaric criminals who seek to obliterate human life and decent people, all in the name of religion. This is a battle between good and evil. When we see the scenes of destruction in the wake of terror, we see no signs that those murdered were Jewish or Christian, Shia or Sunni. When we look upon the strains of innocent blood soaked into the ancient ground, we cannot see the faith or sect or tribe of the victims. We see only that they were children of God whose deaths are an insult to all that is holy. I am proud to announce that the nations here today will be signing an agreement to prevent the financing of terrorism, called the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center, co-chaired by the United States and Saudi Arabia, and joined by every member of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
What has been dubbed the World Religion Tour has morphed into a tour to fight terror. The president, alongside Saudi King Salman, flipped the switch on the Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology, a facility technologically equipped to track terrorist activity online. President Trump praised the new center.
Later today, we will make history again with the opening of the new Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology, located right here in this central part of the Islamic world.
The president believes the facility and location are both pivotal in the fight against terrorism.
From Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen, Iran funds arms and trains terrorists, militias, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region. For decades, Iran has fueled the fires of sectarian conflict and terror. It is a government that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing the destruction of Israel, death to America, and ruin for many leaders and nations in this very room.
The Iranian foreign minister has denounced the latest anti-Tehran remarks made by U.S. President Donald Trump during his visit to Saudi Arabia. On his Twitter account, Mohammad Javad Zarif criticized the U.S. president for verbally attacking Iran. The top Iranian diplomat said it was unclear whether Trump's comments were part of Washington's policy or aimed at milking hundreds of billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia. During a speech in Riyadh, the U.S. president called on all countries to work together to isolate Iran. He also accused the Islamic Republic of fueling the fires of sectarian conflict and terror.
Saudi Arabia is giving its full backing to U.S. President Donald Trump's plans for an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. Last night, in a press conference with U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, the Saudi foreign minister said that the country believes Trump has the strength and decisiveness to broker a deal. The foreign minister's comments come after Trump has signed a $100 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia, including tanks, missile defense systems, and combat ships. Trump says the deal will create jobs in the United States, but some are concerned it could affect Israel's qualitative edge. In 2002, Saudi Arabia promoted an Arab peace initiative which Israel rejected because it mandated the return of huge amounts of Palestinian refugees into Israel. And meanwhile in Jordan, the top Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat is saying that moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem would mean the end of the peace process. Although Trump's ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, supports such a move, it appears increasingly likely that Trump will follow the example of previous presidents and ignore the Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995.
You'd think Israelis would be really excited over U.S. President Donald Trump's first landmark visit to their state, and even though the red carpet is being rolled out for the leader, the public's revealing pretty serious levels of doubt in the new president. Right after Trump assumed office in January, a whopping 79% majority of Israelis said they believe the new White House was more pro-Israel than pro-Palestinian. But now that number has plunged to just 56%. And 4% even feel that Washington's now more pro-Palestinian, which is a 1% rise. The 8% who said they didn't know whether Trump is neutral or not has more than doubled from 8 to 19% since the inauguration.
The Israeli government is pulling out all of the stops for U.S. President Donald Trump's visit tomorrow. Originally, the American leader was going to be met with a basic handshake ceremony and a helicopter to Jerusalem to meet with the Israeli president. But in light of Trump's arrival in Riyadh on Saturday, where he was greeted by the King of Saudi Arabia, an air show, a series of cannons, and an escort of around a dozen horses, Israel may be feeling pressure to up the spectacle. Trump reportedly described the Saudi welcome as very impressive, and former President Barack Obama allegedly didn't receive the same kind of treatment when he visited Saudi Arabia. Israel's Channel 10 News has a picture of a military band practicing on the tarmac and says the Israeli president will make a speech upon Trump's arrival. According to a report at the New York Times, foreign officials are developing a framework for interacting with the unpredictable U.S. president.
Unprecedented security measures and drama ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's touchdown in Israel and Palestine on Monday. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, knowing that the U.S. president will want Palestinian and Israeli peace on the agenda when he arrives, pushed for a meeting and a vote for concessions or confidence-building measures with Palestinians ahead of the U.S. president's arrival. That vote or that meeting turned volatile, according to insiders who said ministers and the prime minister went head-to-head. Eventually, the prime minister, with his cabinet ministers, agreed on economic measures to benefit Palestinians. Ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's arrival, this is what Israel's prime minister had to say about the impending visit.
ידוני עם הנשיא טראמפ בדרכים לחזק עוד יותר את הברית הראשונית והאיתנה עם ארצות הברית. אנחנו נחזק את הקשרים הביטחוניים והם הולכים ומתחזקים מדי יום, ונדון גם בדרכים לקדם את השלום. אדוני הנשיא, אזרחי ישראל מחכים לך בזרועות פתוחות. Mr. President, we look forward to your visit. The citizens of Israel will receive you with open arms.
U.S. President Donald Trump arrives in Israel on Monday, where he will meet with Israeli officials, including Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On Tuesday, he travels to Bethlehem, where he meets Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
North Korea test-fired yet another ballistic missile on Sunday afternoon, which the South Korean military says appeared to be a Pukguksang-2, a new intermediate-range ballistic missile used by the regime. It flew more than 500 kilometers before coming down in waters near Japan. By comparison, last week's Hwasong-12 flew over 700 kilometers. As well as being North Korea's second ballistic missile test in just a week, it's the second since President Moon Jae-in took office earlier this month. President Moon, who was visiting his hometown at the time, convened a National Security Council meeting after being briefed on Pyongyang's missile launch. In a statement issued by the Foreign Ministry, the South Korean government strongly condemned the launch. The statement called North Korea's latest provocation a reckless and irresponsible act, adding that it throws cold water on the international community's expectations and aspiration for peace and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
The U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says he's disturbed by North Korea's latest provocation. However, Tillerson says it could be a sign Pyongyang is starting to feel the pressure from the U.S. and the international community.
In an interview with Fox News on Sunday, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said he was disturbed and disappointed by North Korea's latest ballistic missile test. He also vowed to dial up the pressure on the regime in an effort to convince Pyongyang that de-escalation was the only viable option in achieving peace and prosperity.
We're early in the stages of applying the economic pressure as well as the diplomatic pressure to the regime in North Korea. The ongoing testing is disappointing, it's disturbing, and we ask that they cease that, because until they cease that testing, clearly they have not changed their view.
In his view of North Korea's latest provocations, Tillerson said he believed Pyongyang may be acting out in response to growing U.S. pressure on the regime, which it may be starting to feel. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called it a challenge to the world and said he wants to raise the issue of North Korea's missile threats at the G7 summit in Italy later this month. The UN has also responded by calling an emergency session of the Security Council on Tuesday. According to diplomats, the meeting was requested by South Korea, the United States, and Japan and will take place behind closed doors. The Security Council has already vowed to roll out tougher sanctions on Pyongyang following last week's missile launch by the regime.
Now, the outspoken president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, has shared his views on a range of international issues before his trip to Russia next Tuesday. You can watch the interview in full here on RT tomorrow, but here's a preview.
I have nothing against America. We're perfectly all right. Trump is my friend. But my foreign policy has shifted from what of that pro-Western. I now have this working alliance with China, and I hope to establish a good working relations with Russia. Why? Because Western world, EU and everything, they have this double talk.
Do you think your society will support this idea? Because there are intensive ties within the society with America historically. Do you think you will have support of the people?
If there is anything to gripe for, it is me griping for. Why did you invade my country 50 years ago? Sat on this land and live off with the fat of the land. And you expect me to be happy?
You are so angry. I can feel it.
Yeah. You treat me as if I am your colony still? Huh, you must be kidding. Why would I allow it? Why would I allow you to treat me as if I am your representative here as a colonial governor? We are an independent country. We will survive. We will endure. We can go hungry. But this time, I want my country treated with dignity.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called for unity among countries in the region. He made the comments in Istanbul at the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization summit. The forum looks at improving economic and trade ties between countries such as Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, and Greece. Erdogan addressed the opening of the summit and called on nations to work on partnerships.
Bugün bize The biggest success of this organization for me is that they achieved to bring the countries of a difficult region together around the table and find a common ground. Of course, there may be some political or military problems among these countries. If we keep the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization away from these problems, we can be more efficient. We can even use this organization as a tool to solve these problems. In order to do this, we should focus on our mutual interests rather than our differences, and we should avoid fruitless discussions.
There are reports of at least 80 people being arrested in the Colombian city of Buenaventura after a days-long and mostly peaceful strike turned violent. Local media reports at least one person died in the fracas and 10 police officers were injured. It was sad to see the people of Buenaventura like that. It was a complete loss, destruction. And we're just waiting to see how we're going to move past this tragedy that's come with a strike that was peaceful but ended tragically. Looting and vandalism followed in the Pacific port city as anger mounted over a lack of access to basic amenities such as running water. The government said it respected the peaceful protests but warned it would not tolerate violence.
So there have been lots of parts of the country that have felt a lot like summer over the last couple of weeks, especially kind of over the last week in the east and the southeast. New York had some temperatures up close to 90, above 90 at some points in the northeast. You know, you start to get toward this part of the season where it's late in the spring and you're like, all right, it's just about summertime. I'm starting to think about boating and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, guess what? We got a summer forecast for you. We're going to at least take a look at temperatures, what they're forecast to be in general over the next couple of months. And keep in mind, when you see some of these above average spots and some of these below average spots, it's not like it's going to be like that every day, but just as a whole, overall, you're going to have more days where temperatures will be above average in June on the eastern seaboard, down around the Gulf Coast. Might be a little bit below average up into parts of the Intermountain West and the Northern Plains. And, you know, the thing that really we notice for this summer in particular is that a lot of the country will be above average temperature-wise, very well above average, in fact, in the Southwest in July. That is going to be some serious heat because this is about the hottest part of the country as it is already. Pretty much the same deal in August. The only spots that will be below average will be kind of parts of the northern plains and areas like that. And when you kind of factor them all together and average it all out, June through August, the entire summer, this is the general forecast temperature outlook. You can see a lot of yellow and orange on that map.
Japan is experiencing an unusually hot spell of weather for the time of year. While not currently proving as dangerous as recent deadly summer heat waves, more than 450 people have been hospitalized in the space of a week. With temperatures hovering around the upper 30s Celsius, the country's meteorological society has created a smartphone app offering advice on heat stroke prevention methods.
Well, here we are about halfway through May, and it's about that time of the season where we need to start looking ahead toward hurricane season in the Atlantic. And we take a look at some long-term forecasts and try to get an idea, at least, of how many hurricanes we're going to have. Now, you got to keep one thing in mind, no matter what the forecast is, okay? It only takes one. We saw that last year, Hurricane Matthew, gosh, the year that we had Hurricane Andrew way back in the day. So here is the 30-year average, okay? So usually you'll have about 12 named storms, about 6 hurricanes, and about 2 of those that'll be Category 3 or higher. And none of this information has anything to do with, you know, anybody getting hit by them. This is just how many usually form in the Atlantic. So Colorado State University, they put out a yearly forecast. Theirs is just a little bit below a lot of the averages. But the Weather Channel's forecast, this is what we're forecasting, we're actually going to go a little bit above. And I think at least one of the contributing factors here is probably the fact that we're expecting the El Nino to weaken a little bit more than maybe Colorado State. Maybe they'll change theirs, or maybe we'll have to change ours. I mean, look, this is all long-term forecasting. Like I said, don't get too caught up in it. This was last year. It was a very active season. You could have easily had a lot of these going a little bit farther away from the coast. It only takes one. That's what we've been saying over and over again. If you want to get a quick idea of some of the names for the 2017 season, there they are. I don't see an Ari. That's all right, I guess.
Look closely or you'll miss it. Meet Ping and Pong, the two tiny Sengi twins that were born at the Chester Zoo in England earlier this month. Their name comes from their size. Neither Ping nor Pong were any bigger than table tennis balls when they were born. Despite their tiny stature, the Sengi's closest relatives are elephants, which is why the species is sometimes known as elephant shrew. And even though this little guy is just waking from its slumber, the species can reach speeds of up to 18 miles an hour, making them twice as fast as a cheetah if they were the same size. Just look at its mama go.